Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have a newcomer into the temple, creator of the Reforged RPG, which is doing pretty well for itself on BackerKit right now, with just with just a little bit over 27.5 thousand of the 10,000 that it was trying to go for. The one and only Theodore Jeveli. How you doing today, man?
Very well. Thank you so much for having me. I know that we had to reschedule a couple of times because these horrible hurricanes blew through here and ripped everybody's power lines down. But
Yeah.
Thank you for having us before the end of the backer kit. We still have about 72 hours left.
Yeah.
We're doing great.
That and my own schedule got packed, and I needed to have something to study in advance because that's one of my hang-ups.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm glad we were able to get that game demo out.
Mm-hmm. You know, it allows me to not fly blind on this kind of thing. So,
yeah, for sure.
With that in mind, I do have to go into one of the traditions here in the temple, the humble beginnings. So, I'd like you to walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Yeah, no problem. So I have a brother who is 10 years older than me. He's a military guy, a chess nerd, and a guy who did a lot of track and field. So him and his track and field buddies and his chess team buddies played Redbox Dungeons & Dragons. And when I was very, very small, my brother placated me by allowing me to sit at the table and roll some dice with his friends that are 10 years older than me. I started with Redbox D&D, and then after he went away to school, I picked up Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and then 2nd edition. Started reading Forgotten Realms novels, became a storyteller, or a GM, or DM, I guess, if we were playing D&D, right? A DM back in 92, maybe?
Yeah.
And then I ran a Forgotten Realms game from 92 till 2000. So 2nd edition was kind of the thing I cut my teeth on. We branched out into things like Vampire the Masquerade, all the White Wolf products, all the Palladium products, Rifts, all kinds of games.
My sympathies.
Yep, exactly. We had to learn the other systems or to see different ways of doing things.
Well, I say my sympathies specifically for Palladium because I've had some back and forth about the navigation issues when it comes to Palladium books.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. But we all learn different things from different companies and working with different groups. So a lot of lessons to be learned. So then when I went to college, I got into Warhammer. One of my roommates, I had never even seen it before, and my roommate was big into it. So everybody on the whole floor, and then everybody in my suite, bought an army, and we all painted armies, and we played Warhammer. Then we played Warhammer Fantasy. We did the RPGs that went along with it. We even got ourselves a copy of Chainmail from back in the day. So we did all of those things, and so we varied our gaming experience as much as we could. Then 3rd edition was coming out. I started working with Wizards of the Coast, and I saw the direction the game was going in, the direction the company was going in, and I wasn't thrilled with the pressures that the corporate office was putting on the game designers, and they basically said, you need to make this, you have about a month, and then we're going to take it to a con, and then we're going to show it to people, and then we're going to print it 3 months later, and we need it done by Christmas. And I said, well, you want us to write a whole new system that isn't anything like 2nd edition, and innovate the entire gaming system and the entire market, and you don't want us to playtest any of this. And they said, no, you just need to, don't worry, the players will do that for you. And I said, that is crazy. Okay, that's.
I know a lot of people got raised stink about 3.5, but going back and reading the 3.0 books, 3.5 was necessary.
Oh, totally, absolutely. Because 3.0 was, I mean, it was literally on fire. We were like, how much time do we have to build this? And they were like, you have a month before we're going to show this to the public. And I was just like,
Did
what?
we all just forget how that was the thing that made ET such an infamous joke?
Yeah, it's just an industry bizarre. It's a disconnect in the corporate world, and that's fine. I understand what they're trying to do, and I understand how hard their jobs are and everything. But in the end, you can't ask a design team to actually make something and then play test it and put it out in a short period of time, if
I don't
and
know.
expect people.
Maybe they were possessed by the spirit of Lorraine Williams. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
miss no
it's
playtesting on company grounds.
exactly. I mean, and it's I saw this back in '99, right? And I said, no, I don't want to work in an environment like this. So in 2000, we started building our own system with our own team. And I've had an incredible group of people. We have 135 playtesters that live mostly in the Eastern time zone here in the United States, but we have quite a few in Central, Pacific, a few in Europe, a few in South America, and a couple of them in Asia. And they've all been absolutely amazing. We've worked for 24 years playtesting the game. I've personally done storytelling for at least 10,000 hours of gameplay. And there's 25 other storytellers that run their own games, and they do different genres or different campaign worlds and technological levels and different time zones and all that good stuff. So we know it works. We've play tested it every single way you can think of. So, and we've spent so much time making sure that it's as simple as possible with the crunch that experienced gamers want. And it allows people to take the system and build any kind of character they're looking for that's going to fit the campaign that the storyteller wants to run. And there's an exhaustive amount of time spent talking about, okay, so how do I convert this to my own homebrew world? And I realized that, in the beginning, you have to put a mission statement down. Who are you building the game for? What is the game going to encompass? What's the point of it? So let me answer those questions real fast. Who am I building the game for? Well, 135 people got together over the last 24 years, and we built the game for experienced tabletop role players. Can a new player play the game? Sure. Are they going to get overwhelmed with choices? If the storyteller overwhelms them with choices, they're going to get overwhelmed. We wrote the game for the market, because the real market for TTRPGs is not 10-year-old kids. For some reason, Hasbro still thinks it is. It was when I was 10, but I'm turning 50 here in a couple of years.
Have you seen Hasbro lately? They are masters in the art of getting in their own damn way.
Exactly. So the lion's share of players are 18 plus. So your readers aren't children, and they're not dumb, and they love to be challenged, and they can make their own characters, and they only need the smallest bit of instruction, and then let them go, because they're going to build a whole world. So step one, who are we building it for? Well, we're building it for people that love TTRPGs, that know what TTRPGs are, and that understand that they want to play something that is going to be ultimately theirs. So then the next question. So what's the real mission statement? Why build a system when there are 1,000 other systems? Well, we wanted to be able to do two things that we thought weren't really being addressed well. Number one, I want to have a magic system that's flexible, that fits into whatever campaign setting. The storyteller can add or subtract rules that will mold the magic system to fit their campaign, whatever genre it may be, but have the rules make sense from the bottom up and not have scaling issues or use issues.
Or too good to use. Yeah, I'm not.
Or too good, exactly. Or too good to use, exactly.
Of the Vancian model. I tolerated it at most.
The idea, we go into making new skills. In the Tome of Rules, there's already 600 skills. Why is there 600? Well, it's because it's supposed to fit any campaign setting. Yeah. So there's a section on building new skills, and one of the most important rules when you're building a new skill, obviously you got to balance the skills against itself and against everything else so that it actually fits into the system. You don't want a skill to be too good. If you write a skill that breaks the rules and it's just too good, and then every character has to have it, you wrote a bad skill.
Looking at you,
So-
dexterity.
Say, I'm sorry, couldn't hear you.
Looking at you, dexterity, with you being a borderline god stat.
Oh, yeah, exactly. If you can build a mono stat and you put all your points in there, and then that seems to be the only way to go.
Yeah.
Well, if it's the only way to go, then we made a mistake. So we need to back up a step.
Yeah, I know.
So that's
I know
so that's one of the
dumps-
rules.
Yeah, I know dump stats are a problem, but that's a pendulum that swings both ways, and a lot of people just focus on the dump stat problem.
Totally. Yeah. But anyway, so we want to build a magic system that works from the ground up, and then secondly, I never really understood why most of the systems have kind of like one set of rules for like what the storyteller is using for their monsters and NPCs, and one set of rules for the players. What I mean by that is the idea that like a species or some monster or something has a stat block, and then a player has classes, and I understand that there are plenty of systems that don't do that anymore, but obviously the big ones kind of sort of still do. And when you build something like that and you have issues of balance or issues of playability, I wanted a storyteller to just be able to pick up the game and say, I'm running a campaign, all of you can play dragons. You don't have to learn a new set of rules to do it.
So
All of
it's-
you can, you can all play liches. It's fine. It'll balance out. There are whole chapters in here on how I can make it balanced if 3 people at the table want to play a goblin, and 1 person wants to play a dragon. And yeah, that's tough. That is a big power difference between the two, and it needs to be that, or it doesn't fit what the idea of what most people have, especially TTRPG players, have of what a goblin is versus what a dragon is. I get all that, but then how do you create a system that actually can allow players to do that, both on the storyteller side and on the player side, and make it not be a nightmare? So what we had to do was we took several decades, 24 years, and we created a species builder from the bottom up. So every single species is built out with every single bit that makes them the species, and that gives you a starting species number for that species that you can use to compare it to every other species in the book. And then you get an idea of a scale of power between them. And then there's also a quick system where certain species are put into creature tiers, so that in conversation you can quickly compare those two without actually getting into the nitty-gritty of them. And some of that is in universe for character talk, and some of that is out of play for the understanding of how the game would function. So as we succeeded at this, and it took 20 years to do that. A magic system that works from the bottom to the top, and the ability to use and play any species that it's appropriate to the campaign that the storyteller has their vision for. We then realized, well, how are you going to build all these things? And I said, well, we're going to make an app that functions as the character sheet, and you can make an unlimited number of characters in it. You download the app and you own it. It does not have to work online. It does not need a connection to the internet. It does not have any ads inside it. It does not have any kind of in-app purchases. It does not mine any data from the players at all, and never reports any of that back to us. We're really, really sticklers about the whole what you do at your table and how you play your game is your business, and I don't want to know any of that stuff.
I do have one question on the app then, since you're going down that route.
Yeah.
Now, I had some back and forth regarding D&D Beyond, and one of the things that that when I looked at it was a deal breaker was the fact that they bottle cap what sort of homebrew you can do. You can do new feats, you can do new spells, you can do new subclasses, but you are not allowed to do whole new classes. And for me, that was a deal breaker.
Yeah, it seems silly, right? I mean, if you had a system that could do that. Well, we don't do classes at all, so it won't be a deal breaker with us because we don't use classes.
The big thing for me in this case is, would someone be able to put in their own homebrew if they're making their own new skills or the like.
Absolutely. Every single page of the character sheet, we'll call it, has a section to add new character skills. You can input directly into the creature and object codex any species that you want and any object you can make up.
So
there's just a builder.
Yeah. It sounds like you guys are going for a universalist affair. And I'm guessing that this is full universalist, not the playing half-seas that some more ubiquitous and litigious games try and do.
Yeah, no half-seas. So, for instance, we do sci-fi games, no problem. We do grimdark games, no problem. We do SCP games, no problem. We do modern fantasy, medieval fantasy, high fantasy, historical fantasy. All of these things have already been done, and we run them every week.
And I will give a bit of context on what I mean by playing half-seas, and this is, for long-time viewers of this channel, this will be nothing new, but I've seen plenty of games that pull the card of, oh, you can use this to run any kind of fantasy. But when I look at the races, when I look at the archetypes, classes, builds, what have you, when I look at the features, when I look at the skills, and when I look at the equipment, etc., they very much skew towards one style of fantasy. And as much as some people want to argue otherwise, the Tolkien melting pot may be a massive influence on fantasy, but not all fantasy begins and ends with that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And in the case of something like D&D, I've said, if you can use this to run any kind of fantasy, then why do exotic weapons exist?
Right.
And in that same vein, since you're going universalist, this prompts a different thing. A lot of universalist games, whether it be GURPS, whether it be Hero, Savage Worlds to a lesser extent, I was gonna say Fate, but that has its own kettle of worms that I don't feel like getting into because I'm not drunk enough for that.
Yeah, I'd say Fate is its own animal for sure. Yeah,
but
go on.
With a lot of them have a bit of a higher floor because of the sheer weight of options. And even for veterans, it can lead to a analysis paralysis issue. Now, I'm not asking you if you've eliminated that, because you can't.
Yeah, absolutely
but
not.
Have you taken steps to, at the very least, reduce it through guidance within the book?
Yeah, we have. And we also did what I called a 6-month sanity check. So for 24 years, right? I personally would run 50 to 100 games a year, every single year without fail. And what I did every 6 months was I brought a new player, and I mean new, somebody who had never played a TTRPG game ever.
The FNG.
Yes. Oh my! It doesn't know what dice are. Has never role played. So every 6 months, like clockwork, I brought in the FNG, and the new player was there for my sanity check. Because, of course, I'm going to teach that new player how to play as we play, right? Mm-hmm. And I wanted to see what parts stuck, what parts did they have trouble with, how fast is the learning curve. So you're talking about the floor, right? So obviously, I've answered some of your question in our mission statement. First of all, we wrote this game for experienced players, so I don't expect somebody who is 12 years old who has never played a TTRPG game to buy a 5.5-pound book and get an app and understand any of it. And that makes sense. That's what the game demos are for. That's what conversion guides are for, and all the supplements that we are giving people so that we can walk them into it gently if they're newer players. But having that 6 month, every 6 months, get a brand new person who's never done it and make them, give them the opportunity to fall in love with TTRPG games, and show them the game, and then have them walk away and go, okay, yeah, I get it. One of our new playtesters, I'd say new, it's 2024 now, and we're almost through it, but they were new in 2023, so they started in 2023. They described the game as, it took me a night to learn how to play Reforged. It'll take me a lifetime to master it. And they were a a 15-year Shadowrun storyteller. And now they love Reforged and they use it for their own games, of course. And that's obviously what we want to see. But they were not the FNG guy for the 6 months. They were a veteran player that of other games that was looking for a game that allowed them to do what they want to do with their own homebrew.
If you're playing at a table for 6 months, you're still the FNG, then I have more pressing questions.
Yeah, but every 6 months I'd bring a brand new person in, is what I meant by that. Not play for 6 months. If you can't learn a game in 2 or 3 games, it's too much. Yeah, right? It doesn't pass the sanity check. It needs to be simple enough that the people can jump in, and then they can make the game as complicated or as simple as they want it to be. Every week I do polls on our Reforged VIP channel over on our group, on Facebook. And this week's poll, they wanted to know about the character difficulty system. And it's a kind of a 3-step deal where certain characters require more of a learning curve to play. And I'm sure that makes perfect sense, right? A simple character, so I call them kind of difficulty 1 characters, are characters you can learn how to play right away. You really only need to understand about a third of the rules, and you can play that character just fine forever and have no issues. As long as you understand how the turn-based combat works and how to role play and how to make skill checks. Yeah, that's all you really need to do. A nice simple character. It's for casual players. It's for somebody whose job is really difficult during the day and they want to just play and roll some dice and have a good time. It's for people who want to focus on role play. It's for people that don't want to get into the crunch of all the math. Fine. Mm-hmm. Difficulty 2 characters, these are the ones that want the crunch. They're the ones that they need to know about 2/3 of the rules. They need to have a much deeper understanding of what's going on. They like to play summoners that summon monsters onto the board. They like to play shapeshifters that can switch their species around. Yeah, of course they're going to need to know more about the game. Of course they're going to have more experience to do that, because they're shifting things around and they're playing multiple characters at once. If they have to play multiple characters at once, automatically they're a player that's a veteran, and they've taken it upon themselves to buy those skills that allow them to do that. And then, of course, their gameplay is going to be more hectic. They're going to have more bookkeeping to do. But most of the time, players that want to do that stuff are happy to do that stuff. And then difficulty 3 would be, these are the tough characters. These are the characters that are made with massive amounts of flaws, or they're made with suboptimal builds on purpose, or they're made with really complex backstories, or you're a storyteller. Difficulty 3 style characters are, you're running multiple characters at once. So you've got a mount, and you've got a pet, and you're a summoner, and you're all those things at once, and you got to juggle all of that. If you can do all of that, you can be a storyteller. And you probably are a storyteller. and this is just you're in the rotation. You're lucky enough to actually play. And so obviously, yeah, it takes years of playing TTRPG games to be able to handle all that and think of it as fun and not work, right? Mm-hmm. But I want to make sure that when somebody comes in, they can pick up the game within a night. I generally have people sit for the first game and not play. The reason why is if they've never seen a TTRPG game, although this doesn't really happen very often now, mostly because of Critical Role. And and Hammond's Adventure and all those, like the shows of people actually watching people role play game. So at least people sort of have an idea of what they're walking into. But they come and they sit and they'll listen for the first game, and then they just jump right in and play the next one. And generally speaking, their first character is going to be something that we would consider to be a bit more simple, and that makes sense because we want them to have fun. And as they get better at it, eventually they will make a more complex character. I did say before, we don't use classes, and that was one of the things that that works well in certain games for certain reasons. It's a design choice to use a class, and it's perfectly fine, and it works great in a lot of games. That is absolutely not what we're going for. We are going for characters can be built any way the player wants to build them, as long as they're appropriate for the campaign. The player and the storyteller sign off on it. They can build their character any way they want to, and then they can grow and adapt over time and change as the narrative dictates, so that a player can go, okay, I realize that I made a character that does these things, and now we're involved in this kind of a storyline. And if we're playing for a very long time and we're going to be growing our characters, we want to be able to adapt, and we don't want to be hedged in by things like classes. Of course, that requires a huge amount of work on the game design side, because you have to make all of your skills then be able to be purchasable immediately in a new character, be balanced, not break the game, and work for the character. So we had to break everything back down to its fundamentals. And there's almost really nothing in our game that's similar to, the original greats, other than that we use stats. And so we have statistics, and those statistics help build up the base of a character's skill for something.
Yeah.
So, there's strength and endurance and coordination, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and beauty. We use those 7 things. So, and that's the core for the math of all of the character's skills. And then of course, they add skill points to it, and then they add skill modifiers and tools and enchantments and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So why we built the app was so that you can keep track of all of these things, so that you have all the rules right in your hand, as opposed to having to flip through a book. That was another thing I really wanted to get. I wanted characters and players, the player to choose a character and then have all of the rules for their character right there, really fast. None of this flipping stuff. So in the app, anytime you see a skill name, there's an icon next to it and has a pop-up, and that has all the rules for that skill right there. So it's boom, done. None of this, it's on page 86, and hold on a second, and I'm going to look for this. And no. I really wanted to get away from that. And especially when I was using second edition and skills and powers and all the different expansions that we had, because we had all of them. It was a jumble of what book is that in, and what page was it?
I ended up I've on multiple occasions made unified indexes. And
absolutely.
And put them up on like Google Sites or something like that.
Totally.
Specifically for this, and
totally.
In some games it was harder to do than others because I didn't have a scannable PDF, so I had to write the entire text manually.
Oh yeah. That's hardcore, dear God. That's good for you.
I mean, I'm proud that I did it, but I'd also advise people don't do that unless you want to end up in a padded room in about a week.
Yeah, I totally understand. So obviously we're releasing our book in PDF, and we're releasing it in a printed copy. The printed copy is for collectors and people that want to have a book on the shelf. I have a massive library upstairs. Of course I want to have the book on the shelf, if a new game comes out. But in the end, it's probably not how I'm actually going to use the book. So, if hundreds of PDFs, and then the PDF is great, and it's searchable and all that stuff. So we also are releasing it in a Kindle version, so if people want to use Kindles. But the app itself has everything from the Tome of Rules coded straight into the app. So while you're playing your character, if you buy a skill, and you just click on the thing and it says what the skill does.
Yeah.
And it's another thing too about speeding up gameplay. I have whole chapters about how to speed up your combats and how to keep gameplay moving, how to not break immersion, and all these things. But one of the big things for me was when people are building their characters, they buy a certain number of skills for their characters. They have some flexibility with some skills for utility so that they can adapt to new and emerging situations. But the skills that they purchase are the things that the character can do. So the characters have to buy those skills, and then the limitations that the player has put on their own character by purchasing those skills means, okay, these are what they're going to do in combat. They use this when the chips are down, when the adrenaline is high, when the big miniature has been thrown out onto the table and everybody's freaking out. Well, you don't want to have that paralysis of, well, I've got a spell book here, then there's 90 spells in it, and I could cast any one of these things. So a long time ago, we made warrior skills and spells are skills. So the moves that warriors can learn and do, so that our martial characters are just as effective as our spellcasting characters.
So you're not having martial characters be nothing but one trick.
Oh my God!
One trick.
Huge pet peeve of mine. Huge pet peeve. I mean,
that's how we get the stereotype of the human fighter being
the big dumb fighter
character.
Absolutely, the big dumb fighter. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So that so everything's a skill, and you purchase them, and once you've purchased it, it's easier for you to do because you've purchased it. You can try it untrained if it fits the campaign, but then it's harder for the character to pull it off. So then they spend some points on it. Now they have the skill, and then once they have the skill, they can specialize and master in it and make it easier for themselves to do later. But yes, the idea of like a warrior isn't just I attack and then I do a D8 longsword damage and I'm done.
Yeah.
Another thing too, like getting rid of really ridiculous dice rolls that don't seem to actually scale by any system that makes any kind of sense. So we don't have damage rolls. That always seemed to be an oddity for me, especially going through all the many different systems. So you roll your skill check, and your skill total is the effect. So if I have a 250 for a sword skill or something, then if I successfully do my check, then it's going to do 250 points of damage, and that's it. Yay! And then defenses are mitigation. So everything is mitigate. Everything is opposed rolls. So one person does one thing and they have a number, and then they compare it to the other person's attempt to stop it from happening to them.
Yeah.
So you could have a parry skill of 250, and if you have a sword skill of 200, then the person swings and no damage happens, which is what you want to have. What you want to have happen when you're the parrier. You can miss your parry.
Speaking of that.
Yeah, sure.
I've talked a lot on this channel about what I call the Rome principle. All roads lead to Rome.
Sure.
And part of that is for a good amount of time, and I can't tell you when this change happened within our PG design, but it did happen at some point, where instead of a bunch of divorced subsystems, you had a unifying mechanic that everything was a variation of.
Absolutely.
I'd like to think it's because people started getting further away from the way war games were designed, where that's kind of a thing. But I can't say when that change happened.
Yeah, fair.
But I've called it all roads lead to Rome. I mean, you look at, say, Vampire, everything revolves around a D10 pool. You look at something like Talislanta, everything revolves around that percentile-based D20. You look at basic role-playing, everything revolves around percentile rolls. You look at Rollmaster, everything revolves around a aim high D100.
Yep.
Each of those is the Rome that everything else in its system springs from. What would be the Rome when it comes to Reforged? It's looking like it's a mixture of D10 and D100, depending on the circumstance.
Yeah, those are the only two dice rolls we have, actually. So that makes that really easy. All skill checks use a D100, and then challenge rolls use a D10.
Yeah. So what would be the dividing line between what would count as a challenge roll and what would count as a skill check?
Your ability to make a lore check is going to be a skill. Your ability to swing a sword is a skill. Your ability to cast a spell is a skill. Your ability to run across a room is a skill. As soon as your ability does something bad to somebody else, and generally speaking, it's an all or nothing something bad. Like, I try to poison you. The poison either affects you or it doesn't. I try to charm you. You're either charmed or you're not. You see an illusion, you either believe it or you don't. That kind of thing. All or nothing effects. In addition to the skill check, there's also a D10 check after it. And it's just a D10 versus D10. It's the fastest thing in the world.
And
so this is used
regardless. All die that are rolled are rolled as contested.
I wouldn't say every single roll in the universe is contested, but in reality, most of them are. For instance, if you're playing your character and you successfully made a tracking roll, you see a bunch of tracks. You have a bunch of lores for animals and humanoids and elf and human and dwarf, and you have those lores, and lores will be from your professional section of your character. Those are obviously learned things that you were trained in. You spent points on them, and you're like, okay, so I see tracks. I passed my tracking. I found some tracks. What kind of tracks are they? and then I describe them as humanoid tracks. If you want to make a lore check to determine whether it's an elf's track or an orc's track or a human's track, it's not really contested because you're contested. It's like your own memory, right? So you're rolling to see if you can successfully determine whether or not, based on your character's own lore skills, if that track is whatever one of those humanoid types. So that's not really contested versus the person that made the track, unless the person making the track tried to hide their tracks or tried to change the way they look. Then it's contested.
Okay.
But it might not be. It might not always be contested. But yes, you are. It is fine to say yes. Almost everything in the universe is going to be contested. So
I'm guessing within the rules you have a guideline for different degrees of difficulty in regard to that.
I do, but not nearly what has become other systems' way of doing difficulty.
Yeah.
Much faster.
That, but having
much faster. Yeah.
Having some degree of guidance, so it's not a case of throwing people into the edge of the swimming pool and saying, "Swim, damn it."
Yeah, exactly. So
given that, is it a case where no matter what, whether it's a challenge or a skill, you're trying to aim high? Is it some of them you're aiming low, some of you're aiming high, or is it all aim low? Which approach are you going with that?
With skill checks, you want to roll low, and you want to roll as low as you can on the die, because some of the numbers give you some bonuses. You may also have auto fail, which is a mechanic that is mostly player character driven, whereas they add skills and skill modifiers to their skill check. It becomes increasingly more difficult for them to pass said check. The player does that on their own, and it's one of those, if you want to do some crazy cool martial arts move where you're jumping across the room and spinning, and all those things have mechanics to them, and you've bought those skills and your character's a martial artist, then doing that is a heck of a lot harder than just kicking. Mm-hmm. So the basic kick is not going to have much auto fail, but the spinning, jump, backflip kick is absolutely going to have more auto fail and high risk, high reward. So if you add that risk and try, then yes, of course, you could just fail and nothing will happen. But if you succeed, you're going to get a whole bunch of bonuses. And the player knows that because they've bought these skills, and that's how all of them work. Mm-hmm. And all auto fail is always added in groups of 10. So no matter what the thing is from the universe, whether it is an environmental effect where the storyteller says it's a dark and stormy night and it's raining and it's very hard for you to see, then the number of negative modifiers that they give is always in tens on the die. So you're counting down with auto-fail on your D100. So the low roll on the D100 is something you want to do. And then for the D10 challenge, it's actually high roll wins, or highest roll wins. Defender wins on ties. And I was just recently asked this in another interview, and they said, a lot of gaming systems in the last few years have gone with all of their dice rolls being the same system. Like maybe every dice roll is supposed to be a high number, or all of them are supposed to be low numbers, and very few have any kind of mix and match. Why did you do that? Or first of all, did you do it on purpose? And secondly, why did you do it? And I said, yes, we did it on purpose. We tested both ways, with both rolls being low, both rolls being high. And we ended up with a one low and one high system, especially for the high roll defender wins. It's just a D10 challenge, so it's literally a second for it to happen. It's boom, done.
The only games I can think of that use a D100 that are aim high is any game in the Rollmaster family.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings. Yeah, for sure.
Well,
the original.
Obviously MERP, which I still find hilarious that MERP is a simplified version of Rollmaster, which is technically correct.
Yeah, technically correct. But to continue to answer your question before I lose it there. So did you do it on purpose? Yes, we did. And then why did you do it on purpose? Well, I happen to have a lovely group of 135 players, most of which are ages. I would say the lion's share of them are age 30 to 55, and a whole bunch of them are lawyers and doctors and engineers. And some of my doctors that play at my table are literal brain surgeons. And we started dealing with things like, as you do when you get older, people start passing away and people start having terrible illnesses. Someone very close to us got dementia at a very, very young age. And it was very shocking and very hard to deal with. And we have found, or they have found, many clinics have done research and found that if you are playing games where your brain has to switch from one pathway to the other, it will stave off the effects of that absolutely horrible illness, just like learning multiple languages will. So the idea that you only have to memorize 2 mechanics, a D100 roll low and a D10 roll high, that's it. And then having your brain switch back and forth between those regularly, apparently, is good for your brain health. And I like the idea of my players living forever, and having a good time, and not getting dementia. So that is why we did it.
Yeah, I can get that. And as long as it's still internally consistent within those 2 parameters, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, especially because those are the only 2 dice rolls. Period.
Yeah.
So it's the only things you have to learn, and you can learn it in the first night. So.
I'm finer with that than I was with, say, the way Thaco worked back then. That's another one of those things I don't. I know some people will go into lengthy arguments about ascending or descending AC, but for me, it's a case of just keep things consistent.
Yeah, exactly. Head scratchers.
It was always.
Yeah. Why are saving throws done one way? Why is that go done the other? Yeah, absolutely. Totally with you.
I've said Thaco. Once you understand the math of it, it's not that bad. It's just badly told.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
that's the system I started with. So I know. Totally understand.
Yeah, and I know I keep picking on that system a lot, but it's for a couple of reasons. One, it's funny, and 2, with those there's some of those foundational systems that have been romanticized into people thinking that there was no problem with them because they have some sort of rose-tinted goggles on for them.
Yeah, strained human condition about that.
And
that's true.
And it's important to understand what the reality of those systems were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although within that, one of the things I wanted to do, but I kind of got sidetracked, was play a little bit of a word association regarding different settings that were during the AD&D era, and ask if you were familiar with that particular setting, if you were only familiar with the name, if you had run it at least once.
Sure. Yeah, go right ahead.
I'll start with an old favorite, with Ravenloft.
Oh my God, that was literally my favorite when I was 2nd edition, because I really wanted. I didn't know at the time that I wanted to play in a grimdark world. Because I hadn't been exposed to anything from Games Workshop, anything from Europe when it came to gaming. So that came in my years. I came in college. So when Ravenloft came out, I was all over that. I have every single Ravenloft box set. I have a collector's edition tarot cards. I have the whole thing. I loved Ravenloft. So when I was 2nd edition, that was my thing. I have every Van Richten's guide. Yeah, absolutely.
I am totally not bringing up Ravenloft because of the upcoming Nosferatu movie by Robert Eggers.
Oh, I'm looking forward to the movie.
Yeah, so am I, and it's in part because of the subject matter, which is a fascinating beast in and of itself, but also because Robert Eggers is one of those directors who does not miss.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm excited. But anyway, all right. So that was Ravenloft. Go to the next one before we get too sidetracked.
Dark Sun.
All right. So Dark Sun, one of my longest playtesters. The guy who's been with me literally since the beginning. Eats, breathes, loves, Dark Sun. Dark Sun was his thing. So I have played in many Dark Sun games over the years. Both using the actual Dark Sun rules from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, and then of course having them using Reforged with Dark Sun. So yes, I have played. I have never personally run a Dark Sun game, but I have been a PC in many Dark Sun games.
All right. So in that same direction,
sure.
Al-Qadim.
Al-Qadim is awesome. There was a brief period of time when all of those more obscure bits and pieces of the extended Forgotten Realms slash Greyhawk worlds were sort of erased from the universe, and then they made like a little bit of a comeback. But I loved Al-Qadim. I guess going down that, Rokugan was another one that I absolutely loved.
Yeah, though I prefer Rokugan in the roll and keep system more than any D20 system.
Agreed. Yeah. Legend of the Five Rings is another awesome. Anyway, so keep going. We're gonna go ahead. Go through your list.
Going through Forgotten Realms would be redundant since that was already hinted at several times. So I'll skip that one.
I was a Forgotten Realms storyteller for a long time.
Instead, I'll go with Birthright.
Birthright. Remind me. I don't remember Birthright.
Birthright was a far more Arthurian leaning setting, and one of the big selling points with it was essentially managing a fiefdom.
Yeah, okay. I remember like knights on the cover on horseback and stuff. I don't recall it well enough to say. I'm sure it's upstairs on the shelf, but I don't think I ever actually played it. It's more of one of those things I probably collected.
I consider it the ancestor to stuff like Kingmaker and Pathfinder.
Oh, okay.
Well as a direct ancestor to projects like Seeds of Wars, which I've talked about on this channel in the past.
Got it.
Which was just doubling down on that whole lording over a realm concept.
For sure, yeah.
I may as well go into the bullshit one, Spelljammer.
You say it's a bullshit one, but
I only say that because it didn't have a whole lot of testing because of Lorraine Williams.
Yeah, totally. So, like many of the settings, or like many of the things that came out from the original TSR, and then later, and sort of Wizards when they took over, mostly the original TSR. So, some of their settings were the beginning of a really great idea that just hasn't been thought out, fleshed out, or playtested. So if we start with this, we can get us there, you know? Planescape is a perfect example of something that was fleshed out, not playtested, but fleshed out, at least on the lore side. They did a good job of putting out multiple box sets for the different planes of law and chaos, and then for each individual plane, and tying them all together. And none of that stuff would exist without Spelljammer. So even though there's some terribly clunky, horrible mechanics that were kind of just shoehorned into the beginning of the Spelljammer system, the idea that it can get you from world to world opens up the game into the multiverse. And I loved Planescape, and it wouldn't exist without Spelljammers. So as much as I didn't like helms and spelljamming and the weird space rules, the idea that we need to have them, and we have to have something, and then we are going to put something out there to connect these different the multiverse or different worlds within one single dimension. I love the idea of it. Like I said, it just wasn't an idea that was fleshed out well enough. And it looks like, Hasbro has, dipped their toe in it again. And they're trying again. But I think it's going to get glassed over just like it was before. And we're going to, they put out one book, and that's going to be the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But such an interesting idea. Done better in other systems, of course. But again, this is kind of like foundational texts, right? They're not always great. So, yeah. But they have a great idea, and now somebody else needs to take that ball and run further with it. So, Anyway, that's my feeling on Spelljammer.
Yeah, and I'd say I was tempted to bring up the brief flirtation with Diablo, but instead the last one that I'll mention on the list is Planescape.
Oh yeah, of course. I just mentioned I love Planescape, and I have all the box sets. I also have all the Diablo books too, because I love Diablo, and everybody loves playing Diablo, right? But you play the Diablo game for a different reason than you play. I've personally run several tabletop games set in the Diablo world, because it's an easy one for people who have not played TTRPG games but have played Diablo games. It is an easy one for them to jump from the video game over to the tabletop and use that setting. To pull them in, so it is a very fun setting.
Yeah,
but yes, obviously, Planescape's amazing, and I look.
What I find kind of find kind of amusing in hindsight is I remember reading old snippets when third edition was starting to come out, and people were saying that it was turning D&D into Diablo, despite the fact that there were already several Diablo modules before.
Totally.
That.
Yeah, there totally was. So
yeah, then rehashing that argument in 2008, and I'm like, the more things don't change. But
yeah,
given that kind of thing, to shift a little bit further, do you consider this to be more of a theater of the mind, or more of a grid combat kind of affair?
I would consider it to be more of a grid combat kind of affair, and the reason why is I truly believe that if you have the materials, if you have the ability to have either a virtual tabletop or a camera on a board full of miniatures, and you can do those things, that having some sort of either digital or physical representation of the board while players are playing, it takes a lot of pressure off the storyteller having to describe spatial relationships, which are really difficult to do over Discord. It's much easier to do in person. It's very hard to do, and if you do all theater of the mind, then the type of storytelling you have to adjust it for theater of the mind. If you use some sort of a battle map, or miniatures, or a virtual tabletop, you can clear up so many questions that the player is going to rightfully have if you put their character in a deadly situation. Theater of the mind is perfect for roleplay, but as soon as the combat starts, if you can do it and you have the materials, clear up those questions, put some miniatures down, let the players see what's going on, see where they're standing, and if you're using a battle map and you're using miniatures, especially miniatures with terrain and stuff, you can really get into the strategy of moving characters around a board. You can use cover, you can use concealment, you can use all those things that make martial characters super fun. And if you have players that are martial artists, or they're HEMA swordsmen, or they're, if they're people who have served time in the military, they have transferable skills that they can, if they're playing their characters, they can move their miniatures in a way that's going to be tactically sound. And if it's theater of the mind, I think a lot of that translation is actually lost. It's fine to do it, totally fine, but I'm a tactical guy. I love tactical games. I've been doing martial arts my entire life. I've been an instructor for decades. I love the idea of knowing where I am at the board. I love using my terrain both as a defense and an offense. I love improvised weapons. I just love the idea of being able to have epic, interesting things happen. The dice are there to support me and to give me a chance of failure so that I can feel some sort of catharsis when we win. But moving the miniature around the board really matters to me, and I actually care about that. So the system is written from the point of view that you should be using some sort of board to clear up all of these questions. But it does, but you have to write it from the base of the theater of the mind. So, the range is in feet, and how fast you can move in a round is based on feet, and you move yourself around on the board. So, I'm very passionate about this subject. I think too, if you're a tabletop player and you're also a wargame player, and you've invested a truly obscene amount of money into having an awesome table in your house and having a stupid amount of terrain and miniatures, you want to do something with them, and not just maybe the game they were originally designed for. So I love the idea of being able to do crossover campaigns, or doing a campaign set in 40K because everybody's got a 40K army, and you're going to be a character, and I can actually set up an adventure for those characters in that world, Or the same thing with Lord of the Rings, obviously. Games Workshop owns that too. So, but I have an obscene number of miniatures in the house, and I want to use them because they're fun, and because it adds a new extra level of fun to the game, both for me as a storyteller designing my narrative, and as a player. So I've taken now to all of my games are remote. Since COVID, we went all remote, and obviously it allowed me time to focus on getting the book published and ready for the backer kit and ready to release. So what we did was players would have their miniatures just sent to the house when they had a custom miniature made. I mean, everybody loves Hero Forge and the many, many, many companies like it. But the ability to make your character and actually like hold it in your hand if you're not a skilled Warhammer player who can kit bash something and actually paint something. It's great that you can now just have a printed miniature from an Etsy channel and just boom, and you're putting money in a small business's pocket, and it's somebody with a 3D printer. Awesome. So that whole thing, I just absolutely love it. The idea that somebody can send me miniatures and then you can see your miniature running across the board while we're having our game on whatever day of the week it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get that. Now, as far as a page count when it comes to the core book, be it in PDF or the printed version, what are you shooting for?
Well, not shooting for, it's done. So the PDF is right in front of me, and so is the printed copy. So the printed copy falls just shy of 600 pages. It's unfortunately in print because it's hardcover. I went with the highest quality paper that they allowed me to use. So that bad boy is 5.25 pounds without the leather cover. Our limited editions have a laser engraved handmade leather cover, and that bumps that weight up to 6 pounds. So it's a beefy boy for sure. Mm-hmm. But as a PDF, it's just shy of 600 pages. I went for full color art by an incredible artist named Iron Horrors, who's been around for quite a long time now. She's just been my favorite artist for 5 or 6 years, and I contacted her years ago and was able to get her to do some art for the book. So there's 20 or 30 of her pieces of full color art in the book and in the PDF, obviously. I also went to a cartographer I found, Xing Cartography. And for future projects, world supplements and things like that, because obviously the core rules is the universal system, it has very little fluff in there for a world, because it's meant to be used for your homebrew game, not mine. But I know that eventually I'm going to go ahead and put out a source book for the world that I've been running for 24 years. So I had 20 or 30, I can't remember the exact number at the moment, custom-made maps for that world, and they were just absolutely beautiful. And she sent us the originals, and she scanned them into PDF, so they went into the book. So it's just shy of, I'd say 520. Let's call it 520 pages of rules, and then art up to almost 600 pages.
Mm-hmm. I can get that.
Yeah, and then of course, like I said, in the app, it's not divided as a PDF would be, right? You just open the character, and then the character is divided up into different sections so that are more easily digestible, and you can just click on an ability, and it just pops up with all the rules for said ability. So.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Now, with that in mind, what would you be shooting for as far as a release window? Not a hard date per se, but
yeah, absolutely, totally. Luckily, we have all this up on the backer kit page. We are hoping, if everything goes well, to have the PDFs, the app, and the books in people's hands come end of the year. I really would love to finish 2024 with everybody having copies of Reforged, right basically at Christmas or New Year's. So what's our biggest challenge then? If the PDF is on my computer sitting here talking to you right now, and I have 3 hard copies next to me, it's the app. So the app's done, and I use it every night, except getting it through Google Play has been. They have changed in the last 6 months. They've gone over huge amounts of changes, and they added all these incredible fiery hoops. So we're jumping through those hoops one after another, and so I'm hoping that we will have that done, and it'll just be an easy Google Play download for the app. It was originally coded in Android, and it works on Windows 11 PC. I prefer to use it on Windows 11, but it works just well on my phone too. We have an iOS version for those Apple users as one of our stretch goals in the campaign. But the Android and the PC version were much more important to me at the moment. Those are the first ones we need to finish. So the only real sticking point for release date is how quickly Google will allow us to put it up on Google Play, and that's it. So I'm hoping mid to late December 2024, everybody has their copies and we're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
I have all my extras are done. I had some beautiful obsidian dice cut, and I have some miniatures that were made by one of our playtesters. And there's also STLs available for said miniatures, and they're terrain miniatures. There's a summoning circle and a pillar for terrain that have the company symbol on it, and some other extra goodies that we had made for people. So, but all those are in hand and ready to ship. So,
mm-hmm. I can get that.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens around here.
I absolutely loved it. Thank you.
And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Fair enough. Well, thank you very much, sir. It was a great time, and I'd love to come back on once the Backer Kit campaign is done, especially close to release, because then people will know that they're about to get it in their house. So we're very excited. It's been 24 years of hard work, so.
Mm-hmm. And anytime you see fit to return, oh, sorry, I already did that. And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody!
Then